This is Greg. Greg is fun. Greg is funny. Greg is interesting.
The most unbelievably happy I've ever been.
Later, we will get into what a great human is. But to start, let's go with interesting. In 2018, Greg left his home in England to hike the entire Pacific Crest Trail from Washington State to Mexico. In 2021, he decided to bicycle from Mexico to Argentina, and this is how we met, in Bahia de Los Angeles in January of 2022. Since parting ways in Bahia, Greg decided that he wanted to start from the top, of the planet. So he packed up the bike and his new journey companion, Ana Victoria, and set out to bicycle from the northern tip of Alaska to the southernmost point of Argentina, one of the longest land journeys possible on Earth. In this episode, we will sit down with Greg to share some stories. Welcome to Wake and Wave. Before we get started, let's take a little detour and talk about how we met Greg. It was January of 2022 and the beginning of the Latin America portion of our journey. Glenn, Zil and I had already explored 12 states in the United States, and we were eager to head south in the general direction of Argentina. We had been boondocking through most of the journey so far, setting up the tent in the wilderness as we went. But entering Mexico was a different story. So we decided to start using established campsites that we find on the iOverlander application. This led to a string of interesting encounters down the Baja Peninsula. It's a new day in Mexico. We slept with one last set of sleeping bags as we lost our sleeping bags and we have no idea how. We forgot our GoPro at a campsite and had to drive 10 hours out of the way to retrieve it. But we ended up making friends and documenting life in the fisherman village of La Churrera. About halfway down the Baja, we came across a site called Campo Archilon and immediately fell in love with the place and the people. The Eco Campground is run by a family of biologists on a defunct sea turtle rescue and research center. The site offers a cafe with delicious food, full-sized cabañas for rent, camping spots, and parapas on the beach. We only intended to stay for one night, but from the moment we arrived, there was such a buzzing atmosphere, lively with locals and guests. Antonio shared with us his passion for wildlife and adventure, and many stories about his parents, the founders of the site. Rami, a filmmaker from Mexico City, was experiencing his own awakening and dove into many deep conversations with us.
To create in this material world, because you are living in the material world, not in the spiritual world.
Vanessa, a young veterinarian and whale expert, shared her knowledge of plants and animals.
It's so important for people to see it through your eyes, that they know that it's something breathtaking.
And helped Zil after a dogfight. Sergio runs a continental-style bakery from the kitchen of his home.
Since I was 10 years old, my father had a bakery, and so I started working in a bakery. In fact, this machine was his.
And Marie delivers the tasty treats to doorsteps and markets in town. At Campo Archilon, we quickly built a close-knit group of friends and decided to stay for a couple of weeks. We shared stories over beachside bonfires, meals at local restaurants and homes, and long hikes to unknown desert locations. I feel like I really experienced growth at this place, connecting with myself and with nature. 3 dolphins, and I was hoping that we'd see them closer, but I'm very happy I saw them already. Getting myself into shape and putting myself to work, helping complete some of our first videos on the road. Not just a word, but a feeling. On Wednesday, we finally get to sit down for an interview with Don Alvaro. We met so many people and experienced so much during our stay. And we feel bad for not naming everyone, but don't worry, it will all be covered in a separate episode. This one is about Greg, and we're still getting there. One day, amidst all of these fresh faces and novel places, Greg appeared. For him, like us, it was only supposed to be a one-night stay at the camp. A pit stop on the journey south. Similarly, he ended up staying longer because of the newfound friendships. This was the perfect opportunity to sit with Greg and hear stories from the road.
Yeah, so if I'm telling it to you, then it's less of a performance. I was on my second day and I'd just come over this mountain pass into this beautiful valley. It's the first time I saw the Sirius trees. They look like trees out of like a Dr. Seuss book. I was rolling down this valley and I was like taking loads of photos and I was stopping every 5 seconds. And then I saw this guy walking towards me. He's like covered in dirt and like where like he looks kind of rugged. And he straight away he says to me, I've been lost for 4 days. I haven't had any food or water. Do you have any? And so I instantly give him the chips and I give him one of my 2-litre bottles of water. I don't really know what I can do to help this guy because it's not like I can walk him out to the road because it's 30 miles and that's like a multi-day walk. So I leave him with this food and I give him some extra food and extra water and I'm like, well, if he sends this right, then that's that. And so I pedal on and then like a mile later the kind of gravity of the situation hits me. I was like, there must be something more I can do because otherwise this guy's just going to die out here. And then I remember that I've got this satellite. I do have an option to help this guy, so I instantly I pace it back. I tell him like I totally forgot I have this thing on my handlebars that can get help if you need it, and he was like, yes please do it. So then I hit the SOS button on my InReach. I'm talking back and forth with the response team through my satellite messenger and they're saying yeah, okay, like help's on the way, and we get talking and he's telling me about like how tough the last 4 days have been and it's been like freezing cold nights and then he's telling me about his like wife and kids back in Oaxaca. He's got 3 kids and he's like crying as he's telling me all this. Like he's always obviously very emotional. And then after a while, like after like an hour and a half, he suddenly starts to complain. He's like super cold and he curls up in this ball on the floor and he's like groaning. This situation is getting really dangerous for me too because I'm also way out here without water now. He tells me through his groans that there's water at this abandoned rancho 3 miles down the lane. So I'd have to make the decision to leave this guy lying in the desert groaning, and that's got to be one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. Is it really felt like I was leaving him there to die. He didn't have any water left at that point. So I get to pedaling down this sandy track as fast as I can, and I get there. And he said that it was in like a cattle trough where like cows drink out of. And I see the cattle trough, and I go up to it, and it's completely dry. There's nothing in there. And then I remember that I passed this puddle of like mud, and so I pace it back to this puddle. And on the way back to this puddle, I see 2 other cyclists headed towards me, and that was like the most glorious sight I've ever seen. But we don't really have time for introductions, so I straight away I fill them in on the situation. So I tell them how to get to this guy, and they speed off ahead while I fill up on this muddy puddle water. And when I get back to them, they've now given this guy more water and him some more food, but he's still in quite a bad way. Like he's not really talking and he's completely like stiff and frozen up, like he can barely move. And now we know that if it's over 3 hours, it's going to be nighttime at least by the time help gets here. So I blow up my sleeping mattress, my air mattress, and give him my sleeping bag, and we kind of burrito him in a couple of tent ground sheets as well. And so the mood's obviously like now a lot nicer, and we can hear him snoring away, and it's like, yeah, he probably definitely needed like a lot of rest after that ordeal. So they build a campfire, and every like 10 minutes I'm kind of checking back on him. And so now it's dark. I get another message saying help is 3 to 4 hours away, and these nights get really cold. So we kind of figure out what our options are, and the only option is for them to get in their sleeping bags and give me their puffy jackets. And eventually it gets too cold to kind of sit around, so I just take to pacing up and down. And they feel like the longest hours of my life, and I'm just like eyes glued on the horizon looking for like a tiny glint of like headlight or like a sound of an engine. And I get another message saying help is 15 minutes away. And so I'm like so really like, thank God. Like 15 minutes later there's nothing. An hour later, there's still nothing. 2 hours later, still nothing. So I'm like, well, I'd pretty much lost hope at that point. I was like, maybe they've definitely gotten stuck or something and they've had to turn around. And just as I'm typing out the message back to the Garmin response team people, I hear like a faint engine sound. It definitely sounds different to the plane sounds. And then 5 minutes later, I see the flash of headlights on the valley wall. And this is like 11:30 p.m. at this point. And then so this Humvee rolls up with like 6 Mexican army guys with like assault rifles. And I'm like so relieved to see them. But they give him like water and chocolate and all sorts, and he starts telling them their story, and they're all like quite like taken aback by like what they found. They take down like a few details. They refill my water bottles and then they roll out, and then I guess to hospital or some safe place, probably back to their army base to get checked out. And I texted my mum on my messenger saying, I'm not sure if you were contacted, but just to let you know I'm safe, and I had to SOS, but not for me, and it's a long story, and I'll tell you tomorrow when I get Wi-Fi. And she was like, she said that Garmin had been in contact with them the whole time. They'd had constant phone calls giving them updates, and they got their first phone call at 9 p.m. in the UK. Yeah, and they definitely knew more than me, so they were telling me like, yeah, so there was a search and rescue team that couldn't get through because of the recent rain, that I guess the road was super muddy. So that's why they had to then come out and then send the Mexican army in like a big Humvee. But yeah, so they were up all night, and I called them the next day and told them the whole story, and they were like super proud. And I like when they said that, I was like almost choking up, because that was kind of when it really hit me, the kind of what had happened. Yeah.
Through our time with Greg, we exchanged many stories like this, but we wanted to actually sit down for a comfortable talk. We spent a whole morning setting up to record on the beachfront, but our session was halted due to some raging winds. So we later planned for an indoor talk, borrowing our new friend Antonio's front room, and it worked out. If you could tell me, again, about a bit of your journey.
Yeah, sure. So I am, I'm riding my bicycle south through Baja, and the plan is to keep going once I finish Baja into the mainland of Mexico, and then wiggle my way down through Central and South America for the next 2 or 3 years and just see where I get to. And there's no real plan apart from just the direction of south, and then wherever I want to go. Basically, I'll just go around. I've been going for around 3 months so far.
Okay. So you came from the UK to the States.
Yeah, flew into my friends have a place in Temecula, so I flew into their place, and
California.
Yeah, in California. Spent like a month with them. I thought I was only going to spend like 2 weeks, but then I ended up staying much longer, setting up the bike, getting everything together, and then also slowly going out on rides to build up some leg strength, because I'd never ridden a bike for more than like 2 hours before this trip.
So no training, nothing before?
No, well, that kind of was my training, I guess. When I got the bike, was like 2 weeks of cycling around their place.
Okay.
And then, yeah, then set off around SoCal for a month or two, and then dropped into Baja.
How did you come to this trip, to this journey? How did you come to decide to hit the road this way, this direction?
In 2018, I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. It's a footpath that goes from Mexico to Canada. Well, from the Mexican border to Canada. It's all in the US. And it's 2,650 miles long, and it's all through wilderness.
And you did it in 6 months, the entire trail?
6 months, yeah. Most people do it in 5, but I was taking my sweet time.
And you didn't have any training?
Well, I tried to do a bit of training in London, but there's not much you can do in London for training to hike up mountains, because it's just flat and concrete. But the best thing for, I think, any trip like that is to just go for it, but start very slow and build up while you're doing it. Well, when I finished that, it was heartbreaking, because it was like, oh, this lifestyle that I've grown to love. And I felt like it was my home, was outside in the wilderness. And then suddenly I had to go back to London, like a concrete city. So I straight away made it my goal to find a way to live like that longer term. And so I thought of a bunch of different things. I was like, oh, maybe I need to become like a mountain guide, or maybe I need to do all sorts. I had all sorts of thoughts. It was like, maybe if I just get a job in a place nearby to the mountains, and maybe getting out on the weekend is enough. And then I did a couple of weekend trips like that, and I was like, I realized that being out in nature wasn't actually necessarily the thing I was craving. The thing I was craving was adventure. And you can't get that from, well, I couldn't get that from like a 2 or 3 day trip. For me, adventure is something much, much bigger. I need to feel like I'm on a journey. And I found these videos of the guy named Johan. and he cycled all the way from the Arctic Ocean in Canada, all the way down through North America, Central America, South America. Ever since I saw that, I was like, I need to find a way to do that. A bicycle is actually the best way of doing that, because it is still slow travel, but you can load it up with like up to like 2 to 3 weeks of food and like a few days of water.
But you had to have the appropriate bike
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I
because the trail can be rough. Huh?
yeah. So I've got a bike that's kind of like an expedition ready bike with like big like plus size tires that can go on sand and off road and basically anywhere. So yeah, as soon as I kind of set my mind on that, I spent the next 2 or 3 years in London just living as cheap as I could. So I moved in to my dad's place, so I wasn't paying any rent. And my only 2 goals were to save money and learn Spanish. And I was able to save the money, and I learned enough Spanish to survive. And here I am. Yeah.
Right. So what are you living like? What's your day like? What's your daytime
On the bike.
on the bike? Yeah.
Well, wake up around 6:30, eat my little oats in my sleeping bag, watch the sunrise, and then pack everything up. It normally takes me like an hour to get everything packed up and on the bike. Some people can do it a lot quicker, but I'm quite slow in the morning. I'll look briefly at like what the day has in store. So if there's any big climbs I need to worry about, or anything I need to kind of prepare for, I try and budget my food and water for like around anything over 30 miles a day.
Mm-hmm.
Most people out here cycle a lot more than that, but I'm not really too worried about going fast because I don't really care about cycling. I'm here. The bike is just kind of the best method to see the place I want to see.
Mode of transportation.
Exactly. So if I can cycle like the minimum amount I need to make my food and water last, and then camp at like 1 or 2 p.m. and just spend time in a beautiful place out in the middle of nowhere, I'm quite happy.
Really, what your main thing is water. Like you'll
that's
from one water point to another.
Yeah, everything kind of revolves around the water, especially out here.
How much water do you have per? Like, do you have enough for how many days on your bike?
My maximum capacity is 16 liters. A few days ago, I had to carry 14 because I had like a 120-mile stretch without water. But that's the longest stretch in Baja.
Well, you never carry your full capacity unless you know you will need it.
Yeah, no, it's like if I'm fully loaded, I have to ride very carefully because the bike is so heavy. And so I have 6 liters on the bike, and then I have a 10-liter bladder that goes on my rear rack over the back wheel. And if there's too much weight on that and I go over a bump, the rear rack is like, I had a bolt snap off earlier in the trip. So now I'm very careful about not riding too rough when that's fully loaded with water, because if a bolt snaps off, it could just be one bolt, but then I'm completely stuck. I'd have to defer from the route and basically get it to a town as soon as possible.
Did you get rid of stuff since you left?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, with any trip like this, I think you always kind of over-prepare, and then when you get going, you're like, oh, I need only half of this stuff, because you realize what you use and what you don't use.
So the first time you get more rid of stuff was when you did the Pacific Crest Trail, the PCT.
Oh yeah.
And then, but then this time you were better prepared.
I was definitely better prepared, but there were still things that I had that I didn't need. Normally I stop for lunch for like an hour, and then I get to wherever I get to I normally camp around 4 p.m. and I normally look for a spot that's like away from anywhere humans might see me, because that's the most dangerous thing is humans. And then my next consideration is wind protection, and then it's also nice to have a nice view, and in like a nice peaceful place.
So you're avoiding human only when you go to sleep, or you're trying to also avoid human?
Oh no, it's just when I'm camping, because that's when you're kind of vulnerable. If I'm camped in somewhere where I might be spotted, so I try not to use my headlamp or anything that so people wouldn't
might attract the attention.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what's going through my head when I'm cycling? It's kind of all sorts. a lot of the times I'm just kind of, there's just like a song stuck in my head.
Yeah.
Or I'm just thinking like with thoughts, or I'll be like reliving conversations in my head and like thinking like, oh, this would have been a better thing to say. And then, well, like thinking of like, oh, that would have been like a funny response. And then I'll laugh to myself. Like it's, you go a bit mad. But
You have funny responses, I must say. I listen to them.
it's because I've practiced in my head for all this cycling. Yeah.
I was telling Glenn that we call it pince sans rire in French. It means like you kind of tell your story and you're not smiling or laughing necessarily, and you just say something that's just hilarious. I find it very British, actually.
I think that's entirely British. Yeah. Yeah. Well, not to say that it's not anywhere in the world, but it is like you go to England and it's like everyone talks like that, and it's just no one laughs because everyone's part of the act as well. Like a funny quip, then it's like someone else will be saying like another one to kind of one up you, and no one's laughing because then you kind of lose the game.
You have these kind of things like all day long where you remake our conversation. I have this all day long and I'm not on a bike.
Right.
When I was working, when I was living my normal life before hitting the road, I was doing that all the time. I'm trying to get away from this.
Yeah, well, I find it quite entertaining. Yeah, it's definitely odd, but it's like, you can't really help where your brain goes.
Do you listen to music? Do you listen to podcasts, to radio, anything on the road, or you save your battery and all your...
So I learned this on the Pacific Crest Trail. The first few months I was listening to music, and I found that it's an incredible way to skip time. It's like if there's a climb or something that I was like, oh, this is really hard, I'd put in some music and suddenly I'm at the top of the climb, and it's like I'm
It's everything.
Yeah.
From that.
And it's like, and then I realized like, why do I want that? Like, why do I want to be distracted? And remove because whenever I have something in my ears, like a podcast or music, I'm not present at all. And I think some people are able to be present, but for me, it's like, I'm completely engaged in the music or podcast. So I have listened to music a couple times on this trip, and it's when I'm on like a highway stretch and there's like trucks zooming past me, and it's just like, that's when it's like, that's kind of hard to find an enjoyable angle to be happily cycling along when it's a busy road. But if I'm in like the wilderness, then no, I much prefer just to listen to the sounds and be in my own head and be present.
So are you learning something on this road, on the road? Do you feel like you're learning something about you, about yourself, about people, about life?
Well, a big question. This is it. I always catch myself when I'm like, oh, we're back on the Pacific Crest Trail. If my friends watch this, they'd be like so sick of it, because it's like I'm always referring back to it. It's like, yeah, we get it. You hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. It'd be best if I just tell this story and you haven't heard this yet. Because I was like, I've been hiking for 3 months and I wasn't even halfway done yet. And I was like, this is actually really difficult. And it's the first time I was like, oh, actually, I can see why people quit, because this is brutal. And I was going through a section where I was just getting torn apart by mosquitoes, and it was like there was no rest at all. You can't even like stop to like have a snack or like have lunch or anything. You're just moving all day. Just to imagine like going to the bathroom when you're in a swarm of mosquitoes, it's horrible. So anyway, I was in that kind of hell, and then I don't know what switched, but something in me switched after I was in that period. Where I was like, I'm going to make a more conscious effort to appreciate the moment. And then something in my head just clicked, and it's like, I think I'm very lucky with a brain that just kind of does what I tell it to, and it just kind of is kind of just on the same page. And I flipped into this state of mind where I was kind of hyper present to the point where I really...
Very lucky.
Yeah. But it was like I had complete control over my mind. I couldn't think about anything in the past or future. It was like I was very much just in the present moment. I could just kind of choose to kind of tune my brain into something else. And then I would naturally just like kind of come back at the top of the climb. Like, and I'd just be in kind of deep thought the whole way up. And then at the top, it's like, and I was just noticing lots of like all the little things about the wilderness. And I felt very kind of at peace and at home. And that lasted until the end of the trail, like the next 2 months. And it was just like the most unbelievably happy I've ever been. It was just like total present moment. Then you come back to London and suddenly you got like emails to reply to, and like it's impossible to be, well, I'm sure it's not impossible, but it's very difficult to be present in a situation like that, where you do have to be constantly being buzzed by different things to make a living.
So you just talked about the happiest moment of your life. That was it?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't describe it as a moment. It was just kind of like a period.
When you just decided to be in the present moment.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like a decision. It wasn't like I decided like I'm going to be present. It was just like I was having a really tough time. And then I think something happened where suddenly I wasn't. And 12 hours a day, all day of doing absolutely nothing but walking for, 3-4 months at that point. Like it kind of made sense to me why after that much time of just constant thought, I might slip into a state like that. It's been like, it's so cool to know that is a possibility, is to reach that state of mind again. So I'm like, and I know it's only a matter of time before I get there again, and I'm not there quite yet, but that's kind of been a goal of mine. It's kind of like how people describe flow state when you're working on something that you're really passionate about, and suddenly the time just kind of, it just disappears. It felt like complete mastery of my brain.
Like this period, it was.
Yeah, that one period. I haven't experienced it since, but yeah, like I said, it's just, I know it's there now. I know it's kind of only a matter of time through doing this kind of thing that surely I'll get back there. And it's nice to know that that's something I can strive for, is that kind of hyper present, and once I get there, it's like, I'm sure it won't be difficult just to kind of ride that for a long time. Yeah. So I kind of feel like when I hiked that trail and when I discovered that side of myself, it was almost like that was like a new beginning. So before I hiked that, I was a filmmaker. And the reason I hiked the trail was I was going to make this documentary following the other people that hiked it, because I found it and I was like, this is incredible that people actually do this, and why isn't there a documentary following these people? Because people go on that trail with incredible stories of they walk to kind of heal themselves, and they do, and it's an incredible thing that, you know, you walk for 5-6 months and it provides incredible healing. And I'm like, that would be an incredible story to tell, of following someone going through that mental journey while also on a physical journey. And then as soon as I got out there, I never took the camera out of my bag. Observe this as an observer rather than living it myself. I was like, that would be heartbreaking to have to step back from this experience and remove myself from this experience that I'm loving. A few months down the road, I kind of realized, well, I'd kind of lost all interest in filmmaking altogether. It was like, well, I really thought that was my passion, and I was so passionate about filmmaking, and I thought I was going to change the world with these incredible documentaries. And then I was like, hang on, this is what passion really feels like, is the passion I felt for the outdoors and the life I was living out there.
So not only you lost your passion for filmmaking, but you also realized that, oh, this actual thing I had that I call passion for filmmaking was nothing to compare with what I'm feeling right now.
Exactly, yeah. And it was like my whole identity was built up on being a filmmaker, and all my friends were filmmakers, and my whole life was filmmaking. So to kind of make that observation of, oh, I don't care at all about this anymore. It was kind of like starting from scratch. I'm not the person I thought I was. And now it's like kind of discovering who I am. And it's interesting because before I hiked that trail, I never really knew who I was. And whenever anyone would ask me like a personal question, I'd always have to kind of make up an answer and make up kind of what I thought they wanted to hear, because I never really knew what I thought about it. And then suddenly after this trail, it's like I feel so secure in who I am, and I know exactly who I am, and I can answer all those questions. Because there was a time, obviously, when I was in London, that I knew who I was, but I wasn't living it, and I was just trapped in this box. And I was like, well, I know I have to do a certain amount of work and save a certain amount of money, and I was kind of like pretending to be someone who lives in London, but really I was this person who was like, I didn't feel like I belong there. I realize I look quite haggard, and I look at haggard, like haggard is like I look rough, like I've had a tough time. I look like I've been in the desert for a few weeks, which I have. And I looked in the mirror, I was like, I look terrible, but it's almost like I feel like I look more myself than I ever have, because I kind of look what I've been experiencing almost. I'm gonna get a haircut in the next town. That I'm not too precious about it, but it was just an interesting thought when I looked in the mirror. Like I look crazy, and I've never looked at this before, but it's like I do feel like this is me.
That's what you think you're looking like.
Yeah, you should see a picture of me normally. It's like very clean cut, haircut, and like now it's like I look like a madman. But I feel like a madman as well, and I feel good as like a madman. And it's like, yeah, I showed a picture to my friends as well, and it's kind of clear to them as well. Like, oh, this is who you are. Like it's like, yeah, it kind of looks like finally I look like myself.
So they were also telling what you look like to me.
Yeah, go for it.
You look like a nerd who picked up a bike.
Oh yeah.
And was gonna have amazing stories because everything was so amazing, and there was this sort of naivety that, like everything would have to be amazing. And then you started telling the story, one of those stories. I was like, wow, it must be amazing to be in this place. And you just look like a nerd who picked up a bike and just went into an adventure without.
That's pretty much exactly what happened. Like I can't deny that that's exactly what happened. And it's like I quite enjoy having like a funny look like that, because it's so unsuspecting. It's like I don't feel like I look like someone who would take a bike through Mexico and through Central America.
I don't think you would scare any cartel people.
Yeah,
Type alive.
Yeah, very. What's the word? It's unthreatening.
Unthreatening.
Yeah.
But then when you speak, there is this whole story which comes again now, which to me the moment, and I think I told you, and if I didn't, I think my whole behavior probably told you that I felt like there was a story of awakening.
Knowing who I am is also being totally open to knowing that I don't know who I am. I could be a completely different person in a few months, and that's fine, because that's just all part of the journey. But before I was doing all this outdoorsy stuff, I was just kind of stumbling around in the dark and didn't know how to identify anything.
Did it change your way to relate to people, to interact with people? And I'm talking about people on the road for now.
Oh, I mean, I was terrible at talking to people.
You were?
Yeah, just terrible at talking to people in general. Yeah, and I still feel like I'm not good at talking to people, but it's like with kind of knowing who you are comes a bit more confidence in like, oh, dogs. This is Baja for you.
So the sound you just heard in the background was Zil being attacked by another dog. We didn't know it yet, so we kept on with the interview.
I didn't really feel like I was...
What? Honey, come here.
What?
God damn it. Fuck. It was him. Look at his butt. Oh my God, damn it. You okay? Because I was looking out the window and he kept like looking for places to, I don't know.
It took a couple minutes, but Glenn noticed Zil acting weird, cowering beneath a bench in front of the house and shaking. That was when he noticed the fresh wound on Zil's butt.
That's a big one, man. That's a big one.
It's also like a huge bite, like that's not a nip.
Yeah.
It was a large wound, but definitely not the worst that Zil has been through. Zil seems to get attacked on average once every 6 months since Glenn adopted him in 2016. He's definitely not a fighter and doesn't fight back, but his trauma and defensiveness makes him a target on the road.
He has like the bite here and the lower jaw, or maybe the other way around, but he had... Okay, it's not showing. You wanna come see me?
Luckily, we already had dinner plans with our new friend Vanessa, a veterinarian. She ended up fixing him up about an hour later when we headed over to her house. This moment was as much a shock to us as it is to you. So, to let you cool down a bit, we're going to have an intermission and join Greg in the local grocery store as he resupplies for his next leg of the journey.
It's completely different shopping here than hiking the BCT. Like, when I first shopped in a Mexican store, it took me like an hour to get like just my basic like one day of food. I had no idea what I was looking for. But now I've got it down where I know exactly what I need. And it's very boring food. Yeah, so I've got a 4-day stretch. So the next big food resupply. So I eat very basic food. So breakfast, I just do oats. And I have some like cinnamon powder to make it a little bit nicer. And then through the middle of the day, I just do snacks. The Dia Rosa cupcake, my absolute favorite. And then tip. And that'll see me through to dinner, where I just have beans in tortillas with Fritos and an avocado if I can find it. But it's very better than I eat in the US, because in the US you just eat like ramen and stuff when you're backpacking and like candy. Whereas this is a little bit more nutritious.
Yeah, I know it's hard, but like, don't let that sway the mood.
All right. Okay, so we have a little interruption with a dog drama, but Zil is good now, and I totally forgot where we were. So
Do you? Yeah, we were talking something about because all I really knew was like filmmaking stuff. So it's like I could only really talk to filmmaking people, and like, you know, you talk about like what projects you're working on. It's just so like kind of boring. But it's like I have great friends, and like through that I was able to get past the small talk and make incredible friendships that I'll have for the rest of my life. And it's like those are kind of deep friendships that you never really lose, and they could see through the fact that I didn't know who I was, and like obviously they don't care because
Oh, they accept the change also?
yeah, 100%. Well, it's like I feel like I'm still to a certain extent the same person, because it's like there's still the same humor and the like.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I think the only change is I feel more comfortable talking about myself. I kind of came to the realization very slowly that everything I thought I was, I didn't care about. Like at dinner parties or anything, I would never really talk. I would be the kind of, I would always want to be sat like at the end of the table with like another quieter friend and just like have our own little kind of jokes and banter and not really participate in a main conversation, because it's like to participate in the big conversation takes confidence, and like you gotta be able to work the room, and yeah, it's not like I'm pretending anymore. It's like everyone that you're surrounded by is suddenly the people you rely on if things go bad. So naturally you form these friendships because you need every one of those people, because they could be the person that if you're in a bad situation, they're the ones that come across you. And so you naturally form these bonds with people.
So did it bring something out of your personality, the inner you? Do you feel like you started to give more of yourself, more the real Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel definitely like I'm definitely a lot more open now, and I don't feel embarrassed by much anymore. It's like I feel like before I'd be quite guarded about the things I say about myself. It's like, oh, what are they going to think about me if I say that? But now it's like, to be honest, I don't really care what they think.
Do you think it's you not thinking bad about you?
It's just like, you know, if it's an embarrassing thing, it's like, well, that's just who I am. It's like I've kind of accepted that, like, who cares? Like no one really cares.
Did you find yourself in such need of help that someone actually saved you?
Yeah, so early on the PCT, it was in the desert. So there's 700 miles of desert. It's like water sources in the desert. It's like, it will just be like a little tiny trickle, and there'll be like a leaf that you can stick your bottle under, and you'll get like a few drips a minute, and you have to wait for like a while to fill up a bottle. So it's like, if you're not really paying attention, you'll just walk right by it and you won't even see it. It was around, I think it was 8 miles to the next water, which normally would be doable, but this was the middle of the day in the desert in Southern California, in the Mojave Desert, and there was no shade anywhere. So I was trying to ration this water, and then through rationing it, I was starting to get quite dizzy. If you run out of water in the desert, like, you can die within hours. Like it's like you kind of just keel over and that's it. Like, heat exhaustion is no joke. And so I'm kind of dizzily walking along with tunnel vision, and I start to see this kind of thing in the distance, and I'm like, oh, well, that's if it's like a hut, then that would be perfect, because at least there's shade. Or if it's like an abandoned building, at least I can hang out in the shade, and through the middle of the day wait until later on. I start to make out it's a truck, and someone had driven out into the middle of the desert, set up a truck with like a cooler full of drinks. It's just hanging out, given for any hikers that come through, just in case they need water or anything. And it was like at the exact moment when I really needed help, it just magically appeared on the out in the desert somewhere.
Well, in the moment, I'm sure all you thought was thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you reflect on it, you use the word magic.
Yeah. It was just like, you know,
Miracle.
I feel like, I'm kind of the belief that things just kind of happen that are meant to happen. At least in my life, I've been lucky to experience that things have gone very well for me. And it's like whenever something bad happens, something really good happens because of that bad thing that's happened. It's like that will set up a good thing. And so like when I look back on it, it's like, oh, of course at my scariest moment there's some random person in the desert, because it's kind of how things work. And then, but yeah, it's like when I was telling that story to my dad, he reminded me of that time in the desert, and I was like, oh, you're right, that has kind of come full circle of a very similar experience of me being saved by someone else, and then suddenly years later I'm in a situation where I'm in the right place, right time to help someone else who needs help. What I told you the other night, which was meeting this guy, John, who's riding the same trail I am, and he's 76 years old. It's like one of the hardest biking trails like there is. He's out here at 76 doing it. And like, do you have any advice? And he was like, the most important thing is be comfortable with uncertainty, because everyone tries to control everything about their lives and then it doesn't work out and then they're frustrated. But if you can just embrace uncertainty and be okay with it and know that, you know, there's nothing is certain, and be okay with going with the flow and seeing what happens, then that's where the best things happen, is when you're not expecting them, when you're just completely open to random chance.
Okay, I could talk to you for hours, and but we have to go get dinner. We have to.
Yeah, we have
are
to.
excited to
very
go
excited
get
for
dinner. I think Zil will have a good
And
dinner.
Luckily, it's dinner with a vet.
Luckily, it's dinner with a vet.
Take a look at this poor
Zil will
little
get
guy.
beaten in the middle of the interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much,
Great
Greg.
conversation.
And we're going to stay in touch, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm so happy I met you guys, because the conversations we've had has been very enlightening for me as well,
Enlightening for
hearing
me,
your story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having
we're
me.
meeting again in a few kilometers, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh, a few
Yeah.
hundreds.
We had a great dinner that evening, and Vanessa helped Zil get fixed up. The next morning, we joined Greg at sunrise to hear one more story as he packed up.
Have you had anything fall off when you're on, or forget things?
Yeah, touchy subject, man. This was in the US still. I bought a burrito to take away for dinner, and I had it strapped with these bungee cords, and I was like, this will hold no problem, and it was definitely stuck in there. But I went down this hill and I heard the burrito fall on the floor and then roll, and I'd already, like, I was going too fast, so I'd already gone around the corner, so I was just like, I was distraught. And I get back, I see the burrito on the floor, and it's fallen out of its packaging, out of its foil, out of everything, but the burrito's just sitting there perfectly, still wrapped up. And I turn it over and I'm like, this is just all gonna spill out. And it's just in perfect condition. I just brush off a little bit of dirt, and it's like the most beautiful burrito I'd ever see. And it's like this burrito rolled down asphalt at like 30 miles an hour and just still held its shape. It was incredible. Magic burrito. Next town is a town called Viskanen. So I'm heading off a dirt road up that way. And I don't really know much about the route other than I come to the coast again in a little while, and I've got a rancho that should have water for me in about 70 miles. Yeah, maybe 75, yeah.
It was tough to say goodbye to Greg, but we're certain we will meet on the road again soon. If you would like to keep up to date with Greg and Victoria's current journey from Alaska to Argentina, please check out their pages in the description, or just Google Greg McCahon, GregMcCahon. Our time at Campo Archilon was something special. and marked an era of deep reflection, kinship, and expanded learning and growth. In another episode, we will dive into the details of our entire visit at the site, the people, the nature, and my own reflections about this moment in time. But for now, this episode was about our friend Greg, and we hope you enjoyed it. Have a meaningful awakening.